Back in 1996, Josh and I moved down to Santa Barbara, and there we met Michael McDonald. We trained with him with Kung Fu, Sambo. Eventually, I trained with him in Taekwondo. He was a very outside-of-the-box thinker, and one night during the week, he would have what we called open sparring nights, and schools from all over Santa Barbara would come in and spar, so we'd get a chance to spar with different styles. He would set up different scenarios like grapplers fighting stand-up fighters, or throw weapons into the mix.
One of my favorite scenarios he would go through would be multiple person sparring, where you had to defend against more than one person. If you haven't seen that video where we talk about the tactics of that, you should go back and check out our list of self-defenses. One of my favorite stories, though, we were green belt in the Kung Fu. We were doing some of the kickboxing, and we knew some Sambo. We're starting to learn some grappling and some submissions.
Good training.
Good training. In one of these sparring classes, he decided to put the both of us against a third-degree black belt in Dojo. He was the head instructor of his school. This was a very large guy compared to us and had a lot more sparring experience. As soon as the fight started, what I had noticed is he got hyper-focused on Jeremy. He was coming at him like he wanted to kill him. I noticed that, and I started positioning myself to where he couldn't necessarily look at him and me at the same time. And then out of nowhere, I see him slam his fist really hard into Jeremy's face. At that moment, I got up right behind him, I got my hands locked around his waist, and I was able to sit down and do a suplex to get him down onto the ground. From there, I found an opportunity to reach up and grab his arm, and right between my legs, try to lay back and get him in an extended armbar.
So when he hit me, the first thing I saw was little birdies and stars. I mean, he hit me so hard, it wasn't the little birdies, but I did see stars. And by the time I shook it off, I didn't go on my feet, I was still standing, but by the time I shook it off, I saw him with getting an armbar on this guy, but at the same time, he was trying to fight that armbar off. So my first instinct was grab the arm that he's fighting with, put that in an armbar. All of a sudden, he's in a double armbar, and Mike McDonald yelling, "Brave!"
And at that moment, Mike decided that it was a very unfair thing to pit the two of us against somebody else in multiple person sparring. We've been training together for a long time, and we recognize each other's movements, and we're always paying attention to each other, and we have this twin nonverbal communication thing going on.
Psychic powers.
So what we're going to do today is share through our wisdom and our experience of fighting together against single and multiple opponents some tools that you can use as well. First of all, if you're going to be involving multiple people in a self-defense scenario, you want to make sure that they're trained as to what their job is. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to get out on the mats and train with them. Obviously, if everybody in your family does karate, that's best. But you at least have to make sure they're in on the plan, the tactics of what you're going to be doing, as well as the communication. Problem is with communication, if you're trying to communicate in a self-defense situation, you're stressed out, nobody's going to know what to do. If you've thought about that plan ahead of time and you've discussed how your communication works out, it's going to be easier under an adrenalized state to get out of your mouth what needs to be done and for them to understand what their job is supposed to be.
It helps if the commands that you're using are clear, concise, and exaggerated. Only one or two words. One way you could exaggerate it is even have your commands in a foreign language, and so that will help those commands stand out more.
Kind of like dog training, right?
Even to the point of when you see danger, yelling puppies and kittens, and it doesn't blend in most places, and so that's going to stand out, and your partner's going to go, "Oh, puppies and kittens, he's talking about something else."
Obviously, if somebody's trying to steal your wallet, your partner's not thinking about cute kittens and drooly puppies, right? So let's give you a couple of tools for this communication that you can use. There's going to be some times where you don't want to use verbal communication because you're trying to hide and you don't want people to know your location. Might also be that things are so loud that they can't hear you when you're talking to them. So it's very important that you have hand signals that go along with your verbal communication. One of the forms of verbal communication we used earlier was to be exaggerated and yell out puppies and kittens. You know, we talked about that's obviously outside of the context of what's going on. At the same time, you might have the signal like this. You might exaggerate that signal by banging your arm a couple of times. Does this kind of look like a skull and crossbones for danger? If you have a mnemonic like that that helps you recognize what the symbol means, you don't have to do a lot of thought to recognize it and know what's going on. I might be telling you, danger over there, and I might do that without talking.
Back in World War II, they had to communicate direction, and so they would use the faces of a clock. For instance, 3 o'clock meant to your right, 6 o'clock was behind you, 9 o'clock was to the left of you. Nonverbal, if they can see you, you can always just point in a direction.
You don't have to be a sign language expert to come up with these. A lot of them are universal signs. Like if you want somebody to be quiet, most countries, you do that, they're going to know what you're talking about. If you like something, thumbs up. You don't like the idea or you want to tell somebody no, it's thumbs down, or maybe okay. You've also got look. If you do this, I don't care what language you speak, people are going to realize, hey, you want somebody to look somewhere. Or how about this? What do you think that means? Obviously, that's listen. So what you're looking for is some signs that can be intuitive where you don't have to do a lot of training to communicate your plan.
There are some commands that would be specific to a self-defense scenario. For example, reinforcements. If I call out reinforcements, it means that I am calling 911. And my hand signal can be just that, like I'm talking on a phone.
The next command is cover. I'll make a motion tapping the top of my head, pantomiming that I'm putting on a hat or I'm covering my head. This can be used in a couple of different scenarios. I might tell you, you cover me, I'm going over there. And now you know that I'm going to be moving that way and you need to watch my back. I might also use it as I'll cover you, go that way. So now you understand that I'm going to watch your back while you're trying to move towards safety. There's also the other way that I can say of you, look over there and find cover. Now that you know, you need to go back and look for some place to hide. And I'm pointing out a safe place for you to do that.
The last command that we'll go over is clear, and I'm waving my hand like I'm erasing a chalkboard. Basically what that means is whatever objective I have, whatever command I was given, I have now completed. For instance, if I yelled out support and I'm calling on that cell phone to 911, when I've made that contact and help is on the way, I'm going to yell to my partner, clear, and then by that point they'll know help is on the way.
This is not an exhaustive list of commands by any means. You're going to want to make sure that you sit down with the rest of your team, whether that's your family, whether that's your friend, whether that's your brother or sister, your mom and dad, and just talk about what form of communication you need and how you're going to accomplish that. It's obviously different if you're communicating with an adult versus communication you're going to need for a child.
The next concept we want to talk about is tactics. All of our tactics are sharing the same common goal, which is everybody has to get away to safety. So it's important that everyone in your group is familiar with the ABCs of self-defense. And if you haven't seen that, make sure you go back and watch it. But everybody should be aware of not only where the exits are, but what is your escape plan.
There are a couple of different concepts behind an escape plan. So let's talk about those. Like he said, the primary objective is to get everybody out of danger. So the first thing we're going to discuss is a full retreat. This might mean that you're in your house and you hear somebody breaking into your garage. Your primary objective is to get the entire family out of the house. Maybe you're in a public building and the building is set on fire. Your primary goal is to get everybody out of that fire. One of the things you want to think about, like he said, does everybody know the exits? And are you aware of where everybody's at? If you got little kids, you might have to hold their hands so they don't get away from you. Problem is, by holding hands, I'm eliminating one of the tools I can use. So if I can have my child hold on to my shirt or my belt or my jacket, that can leave me both hands available and I can feel that tug. That tug goes away. I notice, hey, something just happened to my kid. If it's a regular adult, somebody who is trained with you, maybe just having a hand on the shoulder can keep you from getting separated, especially if there's obstacles like smoke around.
Next, let's talk about the tactical retreat. This is kind of a leapfrog kind of retreat where one person is going to stay and engage while another person runs to safe cover. When they get there, they can yell clear, and now they can cover the first person while they now retreat to cover. And you can continue that process until you both have a clear path to safety.
The last tactic we want to discuss for retreating is a partial retreat. That means that one or more of you stay behind so that everybody else can get to safety. This kind of depends on your family dynamic. If you've got a bunch of little kids, your job might be to stay behind while the wife gets the kids to safety because the kids can't get there themselves. Just need to keep in mind that if this is the tactic that you choose, you could be sacrificing your own life to save the life of your family. And I don't know a lot of mom and dads who wouldn't be willing to sacrifice their life to save the life of their kids. If you've got an older age range, you might have your older kid take the little kids off to safety while you and your wife team up together to engage and make sure that the rest of the family is safe.
Whatever the situation, you want to make sure that you know clearly what the roles are in our engagement.
If for some reason escaping is not a safe option, you might have to create the opportunity for a safe escape. If you're going to engage, there's 3 distinct jobs that needs to be covered. One is the person engaging the threat. The other job is the person who's calling for help. The third job is offering support. If you have enough people involved, each one of those jobs can be done simultaneously, and that's the best case scenario. If there's only 2 people, primary goal has got to be getting that help because it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the cops to show up after 911 is called. So one person is going to engage. The other person is going to call for help. Once that help's been called, they've got to immediately move into the job that's left open, which is that support. Now, unfortunately, if you decided to stay behind by yourself, your priorities change a little bit. Remember, number 1 priority has got to be to get to that help. If you know your wife is going away to get the kids out of trouble, you already know the help is going to be covered. She's going to take care of that job. But if you're by yourself, even if you have to get 911 on the phone and then drop it so that you can engage and then realize that support's not going to get there until the police show up.
The role the person takes when they're engaging the danger is to, number 1, try to distract them, asking mind-engaging questions like, do I know you or can I help you? Hopefully through mind-engaging questions, you can distract them from what they originally wanted and dissolve the situation before it gets to the point of combat.
Pull them out of their lizard brain, right?
Ultimately, you might have to go on the attack. And again, the idea of being distracting in that attack, you're going to have to use violence of action. Make sure that they know that you are the threat that they have to deal with right now so that your partners can get away to safety and get some help.
Make sure you go back and watch our videos on using self-defense techniques and violence of action as a tool. That will give you all the resources you need to accomplish that job. Next job we want to talk about is seeking help. There's two ways to be able to accomplish this job. One is to run away to find help. This is your primary example for if you've got small children. You obviously don't want them hanging out watching this violent effect because they might also have violence perpetrated on them. You want them to be able to get away to safety first. Otherwise, if you have somebody there who is competent enough to be able to help you, the other option is to have them stay and call for help. That way, when they're done calling for help, they can now move into the support role.
Now we want to go into more details in the objectives of the support role. Primarily being an extra set of eyes on the battlefield, you want to be looking for a way that you can help your partner in battle.
And that's really the big key, is how can you help instead of being a hindrance. One of the ways that you can help is looking out for other opponents. He might have friends around him. Now the tough thing is, in the moment, are you going to know your right from your left to give those directions? If I say right and left, how about my partner who's out there engaged? Is he going to know his right from his left in the stress of the moment?
My right or your right?
That's kind of hard to say. We mentioned this earlier. World War II, the fighter pilots had a way where if they saw an enemy behind their friend, they could say, hey, there's a bogey on your 6 o'clock. And they would immediately know 6 o'clock is directly behind me and they need to go that way. Hey, there's a bogey on your 9. That just means I need to look to my left, even if I don't know my left from my right. Now that might mean that you have to spend a little bit of time training your partner, especially if that partner is a kid. One of the things we've noticed, most kids can't tell time on a regular clock. They're used to looking at digital clocks.
Cell phones.
So, maybe spend some time with your partner and make sure that they understand the directions of the clock face.
Another thing you can be looking out for as far as potential hazards would be weapons. Maybe it's a weapon that's being wielded by another opponent. Maybe it's a weapon that is actually on a hip that your partner hasn't seen yet. Maybe it's an environmental weapon that can be introduced in battle, and you want to make sure that it can be used to your benefit and not their benefit.
If you haven't seen our video on using your environment in self-defense yet, I'm going to put a card up here. You should make sure you can check that out. There are numerous things that me being in the support role, looking around, hey, there's a table, get behind that. Or maybe I need to get behind something so that I'm protected. Your environment can help, even if you're looking at items around you that can be used as a tool. A weapon that I can get to my partner that's out there engaged, or something that I can just start throwing. Especially if you're a child and you don't want to get involved in hand-to-hand combat, you can at least distract them by throwing stuff at them, right?
Then depending on the situation, if I feel I have an opportunity or I need to step in and help my partner because they're in danger, I may choose to engage myself.
If you've decided to engage and help your partner in hand-to-hand combat, you're going to need some tools so that you can actually help and not get in the way. To make this real easy, we're going to utilize the rules of our multiple person self-defense video. If you haven't already checked that out, I'm going to put a card up here. Watch through it. It's going to give you a lot of good information that could still be handy in a multiple defender scenario. We're just going to reinterpret the rules a little bit. So rule number 1 of multiple person self-defense is don't get surrounded. We're going to reinterpret that for this as to we need to surround our opponent. So generally what that means is that we don't want to be both attacking from the same side. You'll notice if he's trying to attack with the hand that's on the same side, we can bump into each other. Our arms might get tangled up. That's a very common thing you're going to see happening all the time.
Besides that, all the attacks are still coming right here, and we want to be able to separate.
If he's Jackie Chan, he might be able to fight us both this way. So by surrounding our opponent, all that simply means is to take a position where the opponent can't look at both of us at the same time. Even if it's just a simple head turn, that's going to give us a little bit of advantage. While he's looking at him, I can attack. While he's looking at me, he could attack.
And now instead of all the attacks coming from the same angle, there are attacks that now can potentially come from two different angles. The second rule in multiple person self-defense is to line up your opponents. We're going to reinterpret that to get in a line with your opponent. And that can just simply mean that we are on opposite sides of each other from our opponent. This is great because he can look at me or he can look at him, but he can't look at both of us at the same time.
The bad thing about this position would be if we both had guns. I obviously have to be aware of my backdrop, and right now, he is my backdrop. If we both have guns, we're going to end up shooting each other. This is still not a bad position to be in. Like I said, it's hard for him to look at us both at the same time. So if we both moved off to one side, now if we have guns, we're in a V formation, and he's not directly my backdrop.
If we don't have guns, we're just entering melee. I need to remember I came into this as a supporting role. He's the one that initially engaged in combat. And so I want to let him lead, just like in a dance. I don't want to step on his toes. If he ends up kicking on the same side that I'm kicking, we could get tied up or injure each other. We don't want that. So if he's attacking one side, I want to see that and then attack the opposite side. If he's attacking high, I can attack low. And all these are going to do is just confuse my opponent, just like when we were building combos when we were originally talking about self-defense. Splitting that brain from left and right and up and down, but now that's coming at him from two different directions.
Now, this is not an easy task. You're going to have to train with your partner to the point where you and your partner know each other's moves. That's really the best way to make sure you're not getting into each other's way. Couple of things you want to keep in mind is that you obviously don't want to be attacking at the same time, because that's when you're going to end up hitting each other, right? You don't want to be attacking one at a time, because this is not Kung Fu theater. It has to be a coordinated effort. That leads us to the third rule of multiple person self-defense, using your opponents against each other. We're going to only slightly reinterpret this into working together against our opponent. Now, we've already talked about striking and how to coordinate your efforts there, but what about restraining your opponent? What you'll notice is that if he's punching and I'm in a position where he can't see me, I can reach over the top. I'm thinking about grabbing a hold of his elbows and wrestling him behind him and locking my hands so he can't get his elbows away. Let me show you how I'm locking my hands. There's a couple of ways you can do this. If your arms are long enough, you can reach all the way around and grab a hold of your wrist. That makes it a good tight spot that your hand's not just going to release from. A couple of other more common grappling grips is all four of my fingers on both hands wrapping around my hands and my thumbs locking together. There's also this one where you can interlock your fingers and hide your thumbs on the inside. This is also a very strong grip.
In our previous video on dealing with multiple attackers, we talked about some other control holds. First of all, being the armbar. If I can get his wrist and above his elbow, this makes for a nice long bar that I can use as leverage to control his body.
Now, especially effective if he's behind me and I'm throwing punches at an attacker this way, I don't see him coming up. And even if my arm's locked and he's not getting that armbar, I'm at least being distracted by him, which means I'm not seeing this guy trying to hit me right now.
And hopefully with this is to give my partner advantage to where he can take some attacks, he gets distracted again, and now maybe I get this armbar locked in. Otherwise, either way, he's being distracted with this. The other control hold that we showed was from the back using the t-shirt. If I get a handful of his shirt and give it a little twist, it's going to be nice and strong.
And he starts to get a little choke on the front of my throat.
Little choke there, that's going to cause some extra concern for him. At the same time, I'm pulling on the shirt and pushing my elbow forward into his spine, which is pushing his spine out of alignment and getting him a little bit off balance. From there, if he decides to turn one way or another, I can just shift my elbow to that shoulder. I can feel that movement, and so I can control that a little bit. Likewise, if he's got long hair, I can do that same thing. Handful of hair, give it a twist. I'm pulling that head down and pushing my elbow in the back of the spine. If he doesn't have long hair, I might be able to get a handful of short hair. You know, you're going to be able to have to play that by ear. You'll see if they're wearing a crew cut, you won't want to do that. Just go for the shirt.
Outside of restraining their arms, you can also restrain their legs. Common thing we teach in stranger danger self-defense is if a kid's being abducted, they can just bear hug that guy's leg and not let go. The guy's not going to be able to pick him up and carry him. They're not going to have the right leverage for that. If you can restrain one leg, obviously you're going to slow the person down. But if you can be behind them and you can grab a hold of both legs, you can actually take him down to the ground without even trying, just because he's got a loss of balance. The final tactic we want to discuss is what we would refer to as full engagement. This is when, for some reason, finding help and escaping is not currently an option. All hands on deck. Everybody's either going to take the role of engaging or the support role until the opportunity is created that you can find safety and seek help. Puppies and kittens. Okay, calling reinforcements. Clear, come to cover. Stay back, I'm armed, stay back.
911, there's an emergency. Send police and ambulance. There's exit to your 6 o'clock. I'm going to go for it.
Gotcha.
Clear. In conclusion, I just want to point out again, it's really important that you involve your family in this type of training, that everybody understands the family dynamic and what their roles are going to be. And then beyond that, if you're going out with someone who you haven't trained with, that you are able to discuss some type of a plan with them before you go out.
Now, for some reason, when you're with somebody who's not in on the plan, you need to know your plan well enough that you can clearly and concisely communicate that with them so they know exactly what their job needs to be. For instance, if I'm out with my friend that I've never done training with and we haven't talked about the plan ahead of time, I need to be able to tell them, hey, I'm going to engage the threat. You call 911 and then watch my back.
And you need to be able to do that under pressure on the spot.
That can be difficult if you haven't already planned that out ahead of time.
Again, ultimately, our goal is everybody has to escape to safety. Combat is going to be our last resort.
If you need to seek training on this, I'd recommend, if you don't train regularly, take self-defense seminar every 6 months or once a year. You and your whole family get together. You can always get a hold of us. We can put together a cool program for you. You can contact us at dojo2u.com.